The Taylor family, Jacob, 35, Sarah, 34, and their 3 children, Liam, Emma, and Ava, ages 9, 7, and 4, were driving their RV through Montana's notorious Devil's Pass on October 10, 1996. The road was known for its dark tales, whispers of disappearances, and warnings to travelers. But the Taylors were too preoccupied with their destination to pay much mind to rumors. They were excited to finally reach their cabin for a quiet week away from city life. As dusk turned into night, the road became less forgiving. The headlights barely cut through the dense fog that clung to the road, giving everything an eerie glow. Finally, they spotted a small, abandoned campsite just a few miles off the main road. It looked lonely and forgotten, but Jacob, exhausted from driving, decided it would do. They parked, ate a quick dinner, and prepared to rest. None of them knew they would never make it to their cabin. October 11, 1996, 2:14 a.m. Jacob stirred awake, his senses on edge, though he couldn't tell why. His first thought was that he was dreaming. Then he heard it, a faint scratching coming from outside the RV. He held his breath, straining to listen. The sound was steady and deliberate, like nails slowly dragging across metal. He nudged Sarah. "Sarah, do you hear that?" She opened her eyes, blinking groggily. But before she could answer, the scratching stopped. They lay still, their breaths shallow, as if the smallest sound would invite whatever was out there. Then they heard a muffled voice. Emma, their 7-year-old, was whimpering from the back. "Mommy, there's someone outside." Jacob felt a chill run down his spine. He leaned over to the window, pressing his face against the glass. The fog made it difficult to see anything beyond a few feet, but he could have sworn he saw a shadow, shifting just out of reach. It was tall, nearly double the height of a person, and had an unnatural shape. "It's probably just an animal," he murmured, as much to reassure himself as his family. But he knew deep down that this was no animal. As they sat in silence, hoping it was just their imagination, a deep growling noise began to echo around the RV, circling it, like a predator stalking its prey. The sound grew louder, closer, until it finally stopped right at the door. Then came a loud thud, as if something massive had thrown itself against it. The kids started to cry, and Sarah instinctively wrapped her arms around them. Jacob's heart was pounding in his chest. He wanted to protect his family, but a primal fear held him in place. Still, he forced himself to stand, reaching for the door. But just as he touched the handle, he was yanked backward by an unseen force. In an instant, he was outside, lying on the cold, hard ground. The air was thick and heavy, pressing down on him. He scrambled to his feet, dazed and confused, his breath visible in the freezing air. "Sarah," he shouted, panic setting in. He was only a few feet from the RV, yet it felt as if a wall of shadows separated him from his family. He could see them through the windows, huddled together in fear, staring at something he couldn't see. "Sarah. Kids." He pounded on the door, but they didn't react. It was as though he was invisible. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw movement. He turned slowly, and there, just at the edge of the trees, stood a figure. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, human-like, but with distorted, elongated limbs, its face twisted as though it had been melted. Its mouth and eyes were set sideways, like something out of a nightmare. The figure began moving towards the RV, its twisted mouth stretching into a horrific grin. Jacob screamed, banging on the RV door, desperate to break through the invisible barrier that separated him from his family. Inside, Sarah was comforting the kids, oblivious to the figure approaching from outside. Suddenly, Emma shrieked, pointing at the window where the figure's face now pressed against the glass. The creature raised a gnarled hand and began scratching at the window, the sound piercing the silence like nails on a chalkboard. It was playing with them, savoring their fear. Inside, Jacob could see his family screaming, their faces contorted in terror. But no matter how loud he shouted, they couldn't hear him. Helpless, he watched as the creature's twisted grin widened. It seemed to be taunting him, delighting in his helplessness. October 13, 1996. The RV was found 2 days later, parked at the same abandoned campsite. Police and search teams combed the area, but there was no trace of the Taylors. The RV was eerily untouched, as if the family had simply vanished into thin air. The only clue was a single, weathered photograph left inside. In the picture, the Taylors were smiling, standing proudly in front of their RV. But in the background, just barely visible, was a shadowy figure with sideways eyes, staring directly into the camera. No one knew what happened to the Taylors that night. But the locals say that on certain foggy nights, you can hear the faint scratching sounds echoing through Devil's Pass. And some travelers have claimed to see the ghostly figures of a family, wandering through the trees, forever lost. If you drive Devil's Pass at night, beware. Because once you cross into its darkness, there's no telling if you'll ever come back.